Hello everybody. I would like to talk to you this week about perception. So here's our PowerPoint for this time. I love these Escher slides, by the way. They really bring home some of the interesting ideas about how people perceive their world. Our question that we're trying to answer is, how do humans perceive their environment? And the answer is that every perception is different. You know, you could have, you and I could both be sitting like next to me here. We could both be, recording this video together. We could both be saying the same things, looking at the same things, hearing the same sounds. And the cool thing about perception is that it will actually be different for me and for you if we were both doing this together at the same time, in the same way, right? Because all of us are different slightly. So, take a look at this famous drawing here in the right-hand corner. Think to yourself, as you're looking at it, what do I see? Do I see a young lady or an old lady? Some people see a young lady, and if you can't see it, this is her nose, this is her cheekbone here, this is her chin, this is her ear. She's turned away from you, right? For those of you that first saw an old woman, that's fairly common too. And if those of you saw the young woman, the old woman, this is her nose, eye, mouth, chin. She's wearing a babushka, right? A headscarf. And so some people see the young lady, some people see the old lady. It depends on your perception. It's the exact same drawing, the exact same information, right, that we're all looking at. Some of us see one thing, others see another thing. So let's get a definition of perception first. Our definition of perception is using sensory information to understand one's environment. So, every moment of every day you're getting input from your environment, right? And, last couple of weeks we've been talking about memory. Before we even get to memory, though, you need to perceive the input, before you can even make a memory. And that's what perception is about. It's about using sensory information to understand one's environment. But, interestingly, though, perception is not just about passively sensing new inputs, because you have an active role in your environment. You can turn the temperature up and down. You can dress more warmly or cold, or take your coat off. You can turn your TV on. You can play music. You can influence your environment. Right? Also, though, it can be influenced by memory. It can be influenced by learning. It can be influenced by past experiences. Right? We've all had cases where we have, thought we remembered something, but we remembered it incorrectly, right? Or you were there and your sibling was there and you both had the same experience, basically, except for you remembered it differently than your other sibling, and that's because of perception. And then, experience refines a person's perception, and it actually makes you a better perceiver of things. The more things you perceive, the more info you get, the better you get at perceiving things. And think of it, think of if you have a young sibling or a son or a daughter yourself. Think of when you're really little about how you can play interesting games with kids. You can I was just playing with a boy in the lab here. Another student brought him in, and I was playing hide and seek with him. He was he's 1.5, so he's up and moving around. He's not talking too much, but he really thinks you disappear when you duck down. And then he'll be like, "Oh, that's kind of curious." You do it a couple times, he'll go and investigate. You and I know that if I duck down behind a table, that I'm still there, right? But little kids don't know that. They have to learn that sort of thing, right? And once they learn that, they get better at perceiving things. They understand that when the sun goes down at night, it's not actually gone forever, right? It is going to, there's a cycle that it's still out there, that it's still a real object. You know what I mean? So perception can be influenced, by how much experience you have with a particular kind of sense too. So the first topic we'll talk about with perception is called constancy. And that's recognizing the same object with different senses. the definition of constancy. But think of the word, though. I don't know why that came up. Think of the word, though, constancy. It's the base word is constant, right? Something that doesn't change over time. So when you're trying to remember the concept of constancy, just remember the word constant, right? Things stay the same. Okay? So there's a concept called color constancy, right? Which is, we just had Halloween, right? And we had black lights out everywhere. And even though you walk under the black light and your white clothes appear to be glowing or different, you understand though that, what the clothes that you're looking at, say you have like a white shirt on and it's glowing because of the black light. You understand, because we've had a lot of experience with this, you understand that that's still a white shirt, right? That the shirt itself is not glowing. It's not an alien shirt, right? My kids think it's the coolest thing ever. I have a almost 6-year-old and an 8-year-old, and they think that black lights are like the most awesome thing ever. Or like glow in the dark things. They'll go into the bathroom and in their upstairs bathroom because it doesn't have any windows, and they'll shut the door and they have like glow in the dark clothes, and so they have some glow in the dark toys, and they love that stuff. So even if you change the color of lights, you can still understand that if you have color constancy, you can still understand that the object is not changing colors, even if you change the color light. If we put like a pink filter over the light, it turns all the white in the room pink. Like if you put a pink light bulb in your light, or if you wore pink colored glasses, right? Everything kind of looks a little different. Everything's got that pink tinge to it. But you know that things aren't actually all pink just because you put on the pink glasses, right? I hope you know that. Put that out there. I hope you know that. Then there's shape constancy too. And my example is that there's a dog in the distance, running towards you. All right, so it starts off like a little tiny dog, a little tiny baby dog. And you can tell because of the distance involved that, even at 100 yards, the dog is not this big. You might be able to, see that big. You can tell that he's far away, not that he's a little tiny dog. And you can tell that he's close or far from you depending on his actual size, right? So if it's a golden retriever, and it's kind of a big dog, and he's far away, he'll look smaller. If he's close up, he'll look bigger. Kind of to go along with that same concept, there's size constancy. So if the dog was, let's say the golden retriever again, right? You can tell that it's a golden retriever from far away, even though he's tiny, because he's so far. If he was a Chihuahua that far away, you would notice that the Chihuahua should be even tinier. Right? And then up close here, right, the golden retriever is going to be huge, and the Chihuahua is going to be tiny. That's size constancy. You can tell how big something is, even if it's further away, even if it's closer up to you. The size isn't really changing, right? You know that something is far away or not, right? And with shape constancy, the idea is that you can tell it's a dog even though it's far away. You can tell it's not a cow, it's not a car, it's not an airplane, right? You can tell that it's an actual dog, right? Whether it's far away from you or whether it's up close, right? So shape and size constancy work together in order to help you decipher things that are far away or up close. That's shape and size and color constancy. Another idea is called grouping. And the idea here is that your mind actually looks for patterns. Even if there aren't any patterns, your mind is still looking for them. So if you take a look at the graphic in the upper right-hand corner here, it's all funky, right? All the boxes are about to fall over. I want you to do something. I want you to take your hand, and I want you to, right now, just put it up against the screen. And what you'll notice is that the boxes are all in perfect rows, and they're not skewed at all. You can tell this with your hand or with a piece of paper. Okay? What's different about it is that the lines are drawn from a corner to a corner, so it makes it look like, in your perception, that things are off kilter. But what's really happening is that it's taking advantage of this idea in your mind of grouping, right? Your mind is naturally looking for the pattern, right? And you know that since the lines are slightly skewed, what your mind is looking for is, like a downward trajectory, an upward trajectory. And that makes the boxes look all funky. And then for proximity, that means things are if they're grouped close together in your sight, then that means that your mind perceives them as things that go together. And then they look at far things, things that are way in the distance, as separate, even though they may or may not be, right? So if you group things close, if things are close together, they look closer. If things are broken apart or in different places, they look further apart. The good example of this is the moon. When the moon is nice and full and it's close to the horizon, it looks bigger to you than it does when it's full and high in the sky. The reason why is because when it gets closer to the Earth, you automatically think that it's close to the mountains, or it's close to the horizon, or it's close to that building over there, it's close to my house. So it makes it seem in your mind like the moon is actually bigger. But if you took and measured the size of the moon when it's close to the horizon, it's going to be the exact same size as if it's way up high in the air. But you'll notice that if you move that same size moon way up high in the air, and you look up there, you see the moon, it's going to look further away because there's nothing up there. Clouds and stars maybe, but those are all things that are far away, right? That's how proximity works. So another way to group is similarity, right? Things that resemble each other are seen as similar. Your furry bunny is kind of similar to your furry slippers. It's kind of similar to your furry, what's another creature that's furry? We have bunnies, we've got cats, you know what I mean? All those things are kind of seen as similar. For kids and babies, you notice this especially, right? Anything sort of fluffy and stuff is like a stuffed animal. That's why they like stuffed animals. And then there's the concept of closure. So things in your field of vision, let's say, which aren't quite totally complete, are perceived as complete, especially objects. And so in one of the videos that you'll see this week, you'll see actual, like an object that is, say it's like a square. It's almost complete, but not quite. There might be one little gap there. Your mind has a hard time telling there's a little gap there because you're expecting the rectangle to be closed or the square to be closed. And that's grouping. So another idea with perception is called contrast effects. And contrast effects have an influence on how you perceive something, is basically what happens. Your perception is actually affected by the information you get just before you perceive something, just before you sense it. And you can test this out, when you're shoveling next time, by, when you go out and shovel, and you're cold, right, and it's freezing outside, and man, you're like, oh, it's so cold, and you're shoveling, and you're like, man, I gotta get back inside. Then you go back inside, and you put your hands under even just lukewarm water, and you turn it on, and you're like, oh, that's hot, ow, ow, ow. And the water is not actually hot. The water is lukewarm, but your hands are so cold that your body perceives even the lukewarm water as such a difference in temperature that it feels really hot. And then you get the pins and needles feeling, you're like, ow, 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 So test that out next time it's cold outside. It can be your own research experiment. There's a pretty famous study where the subjects of a study were given little cards, and on the cards they had things to think about. One part of the study, the group was going, and they're flashing the cards to them, and they're just flashing the cards, and the people are thinking about the objects on the card, like car, plane, boat, cat, tree, stuff like that. And then they started to think, hey, you know what we could do? We could influence the way they were thinking about the object that was coming up next, right? And so then they tried different prepping people for seeing the object, And what they noticed was that they could manipulate how people saw objects, right? So then the next part of the study, they said, They described Hitler, right, and Nazis. Bad, right? Horrible, horrible objects. And then what they would do is they would introduce people right after that. Right after they say, hey, you know what? Think about Hitler. Think about the Holocaust. Think about how horrible that was. You know how bad the Nazis were. Oh wait, here's Steve, right? Steve, meet Juan, right? Juan, what do you think about Steve? And Juan would be like, man, Steve is horrible. And the reason why Juan thought that is because he was just primed into thinking that Hitler was bad. So in his mind, he's thinking, oh man, Nazis, Hitler, horrible. Oh, Steve, you know? And then he's like, oh, Steve's horrible too. That's called priming. You want to get that technical term, right? So you can influence the way people perceive things by priming them, by introducing something right before they do the perception, right? And I've noticed this in my life when a person likes, whether a person likes a song, likes a movie, likes any sort of art, can be dependent on what the person does right before that, right? So say you just get news of this horrible tragedy in your life, and like while you're on your way to a movie, and then you go watch the movie, you're not really gonna pay attention to the movie, like the movie, as much as you would if you didn't have that horrible news right before then, right? Because that's going to color everything that happens afterwards. That happens with songs, movies, and everything else. So whether a person likes a song can be dependent upon what happens right before you hear that song, right? If you associate that song with, somebody in your life dying, or somebody in your life breaking up with you, or somebody in your life, doing something bad, then you're not going to tend to like that song, right? If you associate that song with something great happening, you just got great news about a promotion at work, or you just got news that you won $1 million. Whatever song you're hearing when that happens, you're going to love that song. You just won $1 million, right? And the next concept is called perceptual set. This is our last concept for the day. Perceptual set. And this is about what you expect to happen. So remember when I talked about the closed objects? This is kind of like that same idea, and really the idea is that a person's expectations, that feeds into what they perceive. So when you expect to perceive something, your idea is to try and fit it into your expectations. So if you look at the drawing at the bottom here, your expectation is of seeing an elephant. Just by looking at it, the expectation is by seeing an elephant. And the more you look down at the feet, the more you're like, what is going on here? Something is really wrong. The same thing can be said for, remember our Escher drawing at the beginning. Here, let me go back to the Escher drawing at the beginning. The same thing can be said for the Escher drawing. That's why I like the Escher drawings, right? If you start in the bottom here, it looks like the guy's walking up the stairs, right? And then he's going to walk up these sets of stairs, and oh my God, then what happened? He's standing on the wall, right? And then this guy, in the bottom left-hand corner, he just walked down the stairs, but then that's part of the wall, right? And then look at these guys up top here. These guys are like glued to the wall. What is wrong with gravity, right? Because you don't expect the stairs to, you expect stairs to progress in a linear fashion up the stairs and to the left. And then you get into all these weird, funky stairs. And how can somebody be walking on the ceiling? Oops, come in here. Right, we'll just do this. All right, so let's go back to perceptual set. It's the same idea with the elephant, right? You're looking at these legs, and you're like, man, something is not right here. This is trippy. And the more you look at it, the more your mind wants to make it fit into your conception of what an elephant should look like. Your mind wants to make it fit that box of an elephant. But the more you look at it, the more you're like, man, that is just weird. And then the legs start to float, right, in and out of things. So that's the idea, is that you expect to see an elephant. But when you look at the elephant, you're like, whoa, my expectations are not matching what I'm seeing, right? There's some cool research that went in along with this, too. For instance, the researchers would flash the word SAEL to people, right? And there were a whole bunch of subjects, like hundreds. When they would prime the subjects with animals and images of animals and talking about animals and making small talk about animals, what the people would see when they flashed the card, SAEL, is they would see the word seal. And that's because everything up to that point had led them to expect that they were going to have a flashcard that said an animal. Then they took this other group of people, right, and they would talk about boats and water and sailing, and then they would flash that card again, S-A-E-L, and the people would see sail instead of seal. And that was because what people expect colors their perceptions, right? So if they expected to see a seal, they expected to see an animal, they would read that as seal. If they expected to see boats and water and stuff like that, they would read this to say sail. Magicians use these tricks all the time. That's what a magician is about, is messing around. Here's the references if you care. Is messing around with your idea of perception, right? They take the idea of what you expect to see and do something different, right? That's what sleight of hand is about. They expect you to front load you with an idea, right? Like you're sawing somebody in half, right? They're not really sawing anybody in half. You expect them to be doing that because that's what you're seeing, right? But it's not what's really happening. All right, guys, so that is our discussion of perception for the week. All right, so I'm going to see you guys in class on Friday, and we're going to talk a little bit more about a specific kind of perception that happens in our dreams. All right, guys, take care.